Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. Earlier this week I put a poll out to see what type of video you would like to see for this week, and you all voted for another sketchbook video. The majority of you voted for summer sketchbook ideas. So I've got my sketchbook and 5 different ideas for you, so let's get started. For the first idea, I'm going to use my alcohol markers. I don't use these all that often, but I thought it would be fun to create a piece. So for this one, I'm just going to be using the chiseled end of my pens. And these pens are the ones that I bought from Dyke. I have got a video on that, so I will link that below if you're interested in using cheap alcohol markers. But essentially I'm just creating these little dashes across my page. I've lightly sketched out a horizon line and a beach, but I'm just adding in these little dashes with the chiseled end of my pen, and I'm using similar colours to one another for the pebbled beach area, and I'm just adding those dashes in. So I took a photograph whilst I was in Brighton. I went to Brighton recently and I'm using that as my reference image, and the beach there is made up of pebbles, so I've tried to find my pens that kind of match the colours I could see along the beach. And then I'm going to start building up the colour of the sea, and there was a few bright blues in the sea, so I'm just adding a dash of blue along with some greys. But as you can see, I've left some of the page in between coming through. I thought this would be a really fun abstract style landscape, almost like a pixel piece of art perhaps, with those sort of dashes, but it's a really good way just to warm up and get used to using a sketchbook, and I found this one to be quite a good little exercise just looking at colour. Once I'd finished using the actual alcohol markers, I then went in with a fine liner pen and I was adding in my line work. So for this I was adding in some details for the waves and also a few larger pebbles, and then I made a start on Brighton Pier. If you've never been to Brighton before, they have got a really big pier which has got fun amusements at the end of it, and there's lots of like food outlets along the pier as well. So whilst I was in Brighton I did have a little walk along the pier. And I just thought this would be a fun exercise to get started with. I did have a practice of this technique on the previous page, but I actually tried blending over the top of my dashes and I didn't like that so much, so I decided to go with the open area. And then we have the final piece. I'm quite pleased with this, considering it was just like a warm-up page in my sketchbook and I was just trying something a little bit different. Let me know what you think. Next up, I'm actually going to be using a toned piece of paper. So I cut this down to a square so that it would fit into my sketchbook. And I started off by lightly sketching out a portrait, so just basic sketch here, but I wanted to add in some sunglasses. So I've created just this person with sunglasses on, and I'm going to be using my oil pastels for this piece because I thought it would be really fun to create quite a bright, bold piece over the top of a toned piece of paper. So I'm going in with blues and pinks and oranges because I really want to concentrate on just the colour and the tone of the piece, and I think having these bright colours just really screams summer to me, and I think it just seems really warm and bright, and I really enjoyed the process of creating this piece. Using the highlights on this toned paper works really well. The whites stand out so well against the grey paper, and with this you can also leave some of the paper completely plain. You don't need to use the entire piece of paper. You can leave some of that tonal value coming through, and that works really well with this piece. For the sunglasses, I just filled those in with a solid black, and then inside the lenses I then start to add in just some reflections and some more of those bright bold colours. Now I have to say I'm not 100% sold on the hair. Next time if I create a portrait like this again, I'm definitely going to incorporate more of those colours into the hair rather than sort of like the black and white and then just a few hints of colour. So that's one thing that I will definitely work on in the future. But overall I'm pretty pleased with this little portrait. It was quite fun to create, and again a good starter piece just to get into working in my sketchbook and thinking of colour. So this next piece is based on Devil's Dyke, which I visited whilst down in Brighton, and I've just lightly sketched this out and I'm going to paint it with my Paul Rubens watercolour paints. So I have created like this impression of fields and hills and then the foreground of the grass in front of me, and I'm just loosely adding in my watercolours, and I'm not too fussed if they kind of bleed and mould into one another because this is just my first layer of paint. And I'm just incorporating lots of different greens in here because I want it to be really nice and vibrant. But if I am completely honest, I actually quite like it like this. I think if you're just wanting to practice colours of what you can see whilst out and about, then I think this would be a really fun way just to capture the colours that you can see and do some colour studies. But I'm actually then going to incorporate some different textures and patterns over the top of my work. So in each of the little fields I'm just adding in some different details with different contrasting greens to what was already down. I really enjoyed visiting Devil's Dyke. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been before. I was just blown away by the actual sheer scale of Devil's Dyke. It's absolutely enormous, and I don't think you can really get that across in any photographs. But I had a really good time visiting Devil's Dyke and I would highly recommend it. So as you can see, I've just added in lots of different mark making and patterns across my piece of artwork, and I think this really does help to finalize the piece. And I was kind of going after a abstract style landscape, and I'm definitely getting what I was trying to achieve across, and I'm really pleased with this outcome. Let me know what you think in the comments. Would you try a landscape like this and practice your mark making and your patterns along with your watercolours? So I'm just adding in an area that I want to paint in because I do like having a white border around my paints sometimes. And I'm just blocking in my paints now. So I've got this sandy colour at the bottom and then a light blue at the top. And I'm trying to achieve an aerial view of a seascape. So I'm going to add in different shades of blue. So I've got some darker blues going in, and then I'm going to add in some greeny blues, and just try and blend those in together to give this piece a little bit of depth so it doesn't look like it's just one solid flat area, because that's one thing that you need to remember for painting the sea. It's always moving, and then there's darker areas, there's highlights, so it's really important to get a variety of different tones in when you're painting the water. Once I have created all of my shades of blue, I'm then going to go in with my palette knife, and I'm going to try and create the effect of the white water where the waves are crashing and it's giving a little bit of texture onto the piece, and I'm just scraping up the palette knife to add this in. And I really enjoy using a palette knife to paint with because you get some really nice textures with your work, and it's also excellent working in your sketchbook on these little ideas and deciding whether you want to create this on a larger scale. Now I use that same motion of just scraping down that paint to show how the water is running along the sand, and I'm really pleased with this little outcome. And one of my absolute favourite things to do is peel off that tape. It's so satisfying. And my last of the 5 ideas is of summer treats, because of course you can't have summer without having some treats. And I absolutely love pieces of artwork about food. It's one of my absolute favourite subject matters. And for this piece, I'm using my Himi gouache paints that I unboxed and reviewed in my last video, so I'll add that to the description box if you're interested in seeing this one. So for this painting, I have gone for an ice pop, a 99 ice cream, which is like a whippy ice cream with a flake in it if you haven't got that in your country, and then a fab, which is an ice lolly with a chocolate coating on the top with hundreds and thousands, and it's pretty iconic, I think, in the UK. Well, as far as ice creams go, I suppose. So for this piece, I'm trying to go for like a more painterly texture and some looser brush strokes, and then I want to add in this drop shadow because I think the outer blue drop shadow will just work really well with the style that I'm going for. I'm really inspired by Wayne Thiebaud's paintings and Joel Peckman, so I was trying to achieve something with that in mind. So I'm underpainting my pieces of artwork and creating the paints on top, just so that I can achieve a little bit of those colours coming through the piece that are underneath, but also I think it just helps to decide on the colours that I want to go for. With the ice cream, I started with the highlights first, just to block in the shape of the whipped ice cream. And for me, this worked really well just to decide on how the folds of the ice cream were going to work. And then I can start adding in all of the darker tones and picking up a little bit of that blue from the ice lolly as well. Now, every single day, an ice cream van passes my house, and it's always so tempting to get an ice cream. That little jingle goes off and I'm always tempted to get a 99er with a flake, but I always resist. Let me know in the comments what your absolute favourite go-to ice cream is. I really love the dairy-free Ben & Jerry's chocolate fudge brownie. That is my absolute favourite ice cream. So I'm now adding in a few more blues just to pick up and incorporate the two pieces together. I think having those blues across both pieces will work really well. And again, I'm adding in a little drop shadow to make it look like it's standing out from the page. And then last but not least, I'm now working on that fab. So I'm just adding in an underpainting of red, white and blue.
And then over the top of this I'm going to incorporate the actual final colours. So the top piece of this is a chocolate coating, and the bottom is sort of like a classic ice lolly strawberry flavour, and the middle has got a white coating over the top. And I'm just again using those painterly textures to add in some different tones and different values to the piece, and then I can start working on those hundreds and thousands. Now I found that it wasn't so vibrant going straight on with my pink, so I decided to add in white hundreds and thousands first and then go over the top of those with the colours that I wanted. And on a fab there are orange, pink, yellowy creamy colour and white hundreds and thousands, and then this is the final piece and I absolutely love it. It's one of my favourites. Actually, it's my favourite piece from this video.
I hope you have enjoyed these 5 different ideas for your sketchbook. My absolute favourite that I have created is the ice cream painting. I really enjoy using blues for my shadows and my dark tones, so that piece for me was really fun to create. Let me know in the comments what idea you are going to try out in your sketchbook, and also make sure you tag me on Instagram so I can see how your work turned out. Make sure you subscribe if you aren't already subscribed, and I will see you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Bye! I'm just basking in the sun.